What up, though? Genius lyrics. Buffalo Soldier. Bob Marley and the Wailers. Buffalo Soldier. Dreadlocked Rasta. There was a Buffalo Soldier in the heart of America. Stolen from Africa. Brought to America. Fighting on arrival. Fighting for survival. Stolen from Africa. Brought to America. How the dreadlocked Rasta was a Buffalo Soldier. Woy, oy, oy, woy, oy, oy, oy. Let's shake it. Buffalo Soldiers, United States Army. During the American Civil War, the U.S. government formed regiments known as the United States Colored Troops, composed of black soldiers led by white officers. Congress reorganized the Army, composed of black soldiers led by white officers. Use your thinking skills, use your critical thinking skills. Just a quick note. Composed of black soldiers led by white officers. Black. This means that we have no idea who's being spoken of. White officers, white, we have no idea who these people are or their background. Congress reorganized the Army in 1866 and authorized the formation of 2 regiments of black cavalry with the designations 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalry and 4 regiments of black infantry designated the 38th, 39th, and 40th and 41st Infantry Regiments, colored. So from black to colored. We know black is usually meant to describe someone who is a darker shade of brown, and colored is used to describe someone who is one of the many shades of brown, of lighter brown. These unsung heroes were fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands. They were former slaves, former workers, former employees, former laborers, and Civil War veterans. They were unlearned and self-educated. They were writers, sharecroppers, painters, cigar makers, waiters, cooks, and mechanics. They were unlearned. But then in the next sentence, it says they were writers, sharecroppers, painters, cigar makers, waiters, cooks, and mechanics. Just as their white colleagues, these men came from all walks of life. Armed with a 45 caliber to 70 caliber Springfield carbine, a Colt Army 45 caliber pistol, model 1873, and a saber. Buffalo soldiers were not issued a neckerchief, but generally purchased one to wear, sometimes choosing a yellow color, but more often red or white. Some scholars attribute the name to the Indians likening the short curly hair of the black troopers to that of the buffalo. Another possible source of the nickname was the heavy buffalo robes the soldiers wore on winter campaigns. Still, others say that when the American bison was wounded or cornered, it fought ferociously, displaying uncommon stamina and courage identical to the black man in battle. National Park Service, Charles Young, Buffalo Soldiers. American Plains Indians who fought against these soldiers referred to the black cavalry troops as Buffalo Soldiers because of their dark, curly hair, which resembled a buffalo's coat, and because of their fierce nature of fighting. The nickname soon became synonymous with all African American regiments formed in 1866. So we have black, colored, African American. Again, all these things tell us nothing about who these people were. The Atlantic. Kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. Okay, this is Dwindling Buffalo Herds, 19th century. Kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. So, where were the buffaloes? And every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. Dwindling buffalo herds in the 19th century or the 1800s. As you can see in the legend, the darker tan section is the original extent of buffalo herds. The much lighter, pinkish, yellowish, whatever you want to call it, says range in 1870, and the orangish reddish is the range in 1889. So the original extent of buffalo herds, as you can see, were all over the South, were all over the East, Southeast, all the way up into Canada. A large presence of buffalo herds in the Americas, in North America, Canada, and such, even in Mexico, as you can see. We're talking West Virginia, Virginia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Georgia, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Texas, just the list goes on. So, in all these places, you get rid of the buffalo, kill the buffalo, you kill the Indian. Who are the people living in these places? Where were your four grandparents born? Where were your 8 great grandparents born? Where were your 16 second great grandparents born? Kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. The American bison is the new U.S. national mammal, but its slaughter was once seen as a way to starve Americans into submission by J. Weston Phippen, May 13th, 2016. It was near the end of September, and unusually warm week in 1871, and William Buffalo Bill Cody and a group of wealthy New Yorkers stood atop a grassy hill near the Platte River in Nebraska, where 2 miles off they spotted six huge brown beasts. Cody was a legend of the frontier era, part myth conjured in dime novels. Cody was loquacious and friendly, an expert hunter. He knew that with the wind blowing from behind, the men risked their scent being carried to the animals and scaring them away. The United States Army, which was outfitting the hunting expedition, the Army wasn't in the business of guiding hunting trips for soft-skinned Wall Streeters, but it was in the business of controlling the Native Americans in the area, and that meant killing buffalo. Remember the area of the buffalo. One colonel 4 years earlier had told a wealthy hunter who felt the shiver of guilt after he shot 30 bulls in one trip, kill every buffalo you can. Every buffalo dead is an Indian gone. Cody and the men made a contest of the hunt. Whoever killed the first buffalo would win an engraved silver chalice. Years later, in an article he wrote for the magazine Cosmopolitan, Cody would call this trip the best equipped he'd ever taken. The Army had supplied an armed escort and 25 wagons filled with cooks, linen, china, carpet for their tents, and a traveling ice house to keep their wine chilled. The reason for such extravagance was undoubtedly because the New Yorkers were well connected, but also because Major General Philip Sheridan, the man with the task of forcing Americans off the Great Plains and onto reservations, had come along with them. This was a leisure hunt, but Sheridan also viewed the extermination of buffalo and his victory over the Americans as a single, inextricable mission. And in that sense, it could be argued that any buffalo hunt was Army business. On Monday, President Obama signed the National Bison Legacy Act, making the American bison, or the buffalo, as it's more often called, the national mammal. It's only the second animal to represent the U.S. joining the bald eagle. It's ironic, of course, because at one time settlers and hide hunters killed the animal to near extinction, and tourists shot the animals from the windows of trains as if the slaughter could last forever. Buffalo had once numbered more than 30 million, and by the end of the 19th century, there were only a few hundred in the wild. Today, some 20,000 to 25,000 remain in public herds. Many things contributed to the buffalo's demise. One factor was that for a long time, the country's highest generals, politicians, and even then President Ulysses S. Grant saw the destruction of buffalo as solution to the country's Indian problem. Before Sheridan joined Cody and the New Yorkers on the hunt, and before he oversaw the relocation of Americans on the plains, he was a major general for the Union during the Civil War. It was there he learned the power of destroying enemy resources. Sherman knew that as long as the Sioux hunted buffalo, they'd never surrender to life with a plow. This was manifest destiny, and there'd never be enough room for Americans and white settlers. The U.S. wanted them docile to take up farming on the reservations and stay put. In many census records of my own family, it says a lot of times that the head of the household was the occupation was farmer. I'm pretty sure if you look into your family, look into the records, look into the genealogy, look into the census records, it very well may say that the head of the households of your family members were also labeled farmers. The U.S. wanted them docile to take up farming on the reservations and stay put. The tribes lived alongside buffalo herds and took from them their skins for tents and their meat for food. Cody and the New Yorkers, Sherman, was determined to clear the Central Plains region between the Platte and the Arkansas of Indians so that the railroad, stage lines, and telegraph could operate unmolested. Sherman knew that as long as the Sioux hunted buffalo, they'd never surrender to life with a plow. In a letter to Sheridan dated May 10th, 1868, Sherman wrote that as long as buffalo roam those parts of Nebraska, Indians will go there. By now, the buffalo that once covered all the Great Plains were hewn into two giant herds, one in the north and one in the south. When Sheridan asked the trader how many buffalo he thought lived in the southern herd, the man said 10 billion. Obviously, that was absurd. In October 1868, Sheridan wrote to Sherman that their best hope to control the Americans was to make them poor by the destruction of their stock. Cody had joined the cavalry at 17, and he earned the name Buffalo Bill because in one 18-month stretch, he claimed to have killed 4,280 buffalo. In 1870, a bull hide sold for $3.50. One frontiersman, Frank Meyer, figured if he spent 25 cents on each round of ammo, then every time I fired one, I got my investment back 12 times over. Buffalo were slow grazing, four-legged bankrolls. In 1873, thousands of buffalo runners came, sometimes averaging 50 kills a day. They sliced their humps, skinned off the hides, tore out their tongues, and left the rest on the prairies to rot. In towns, hides rose in stacks as tall as houses. Army commanders were even providing bullets to these hunters, says Andrew C. Eisenberg, the author of The Destruction of the Bison and a professor of history at Temple University. We were never able to control the savages until their supply of meat was cut off. In the next decade, the hide hunters exterminated nearly every buffalo. Colonel Dodge would later write that where there were myriads of buffalo the year before, there were now myriads of carcasses. The air was foul with the sickening stench, and the vast plain, which only a short 12 months before teemed with animal life, was a dead, solitary desert. So many bones that newcomers felt nervous. Before the buffalo runners had wiped out almost every animal, and the U.S. Army had to protect the last remaining wild herd in Yellowstone National Park. Buffalo Soldiers and Indian Wars. This is from www.buffalosoldier.net. As a Buffalo soldier, great-grandfather Sergeant Henry Parker and the U.S. Army were a part of the Plains Indians' nightmare. After escaping from his slave master in Apton Valley, Kentucky, great-grandfather joined the 101st Regiment United States Colored Infantry at 18 years of age. Henry Parker enlisted in the U.S. Cavalry on May 18, 1867 in Memphis, Tennessee by Captain Davis for a period of 5 years. He was 21 years old and listed his occupation as a groom. His description included black eyes, black hair, and a complexion listed as mulatto. In every major war throughout the history of the United States, from the American Revolution through the Indian Wars, Native Americans and African Americans have fought with and against one another. This scenario prevailed during the Civil War. Some tribes fought for the South, such as the Cherokees, while others assisted the North, like the Seminoles. Most Americans viewed the Indians as incorrigible and non-reformable savages, those closest to the warring. At the outbreak of the Civil War, the government was fighting the Indians in the West. It withdrew most of its men and resources from the Indian Wars to concentrate on ending the rebellion. At the end of the Civil War, 186,000 black soldiers had participated in the war, with 38,000 killed in action. Southerners and Eastern populations did not want to see armed Negro soldiers near or in their communities. Negro soldiers near or in your community. The Plains Indians first accepted the arrival of the 5 civilized nations as the government moved them onto the plains. Resentment to the 5 civilized nations also occurred due to their adoption of the white man's ways, such as farming, style of dress, home building, and to some degree, slavery for life based on a person's color and bloodline. Resentment to the 5 civilized nations also occurred due to their adoption of the white man's ways, such as farming, style of dress, home building, and to some degree, slavery for life based on a person's color and bloodline. Where did the resentment for the 5 civilized nations come from? The 5 civilized nations we now know are labeled as Native Americans. Sometimes people will say American Indians. They will try and use those synonymously. But we know these are different groups. The 5 civilized tribes adopted the so-called white man's ways. The 5 civilized tribes were also comprised of a large amount of so-called white men. So who resented them? Was it the American Indians who resented these 5 civilized nations? Let's shake it. Buffalo Soldiers, National Museum of African American History and Culture. Many lenses, Buffalo Soldiers. As subjects of both historical study and popular legend, the African American servicemen known as Buffalo Soldiers continue to provoke conversations. African American, the term wasn't being used, so who is being referred to by this term? For museum curators, interpreting the Buffalo Soldiers' legacy also means distinguishing facts from lore. The National Museum of African American History and Culture's Kowalski Salter and Lonnie G. Bunch venture to do just that. The National Museum of African American History, when there's a museum called African American History, all those people who are termed African Americans and are not don't have a chance. The Buffalo Robe, Kruwowski A. Salter, Lonnie G. Bunch III, founding director. The buffalo robe, a type of fur overcoat, is an iconic object linking African American soldiers with Native Americans and white explorers in the 19th century in both fact and myth. Native Americans made buffalo robes from the skin and hair of buffaloes, and some wrapped their dead in the robes before placing them on scaffolds. White explorers on the Lewis and Clark Trail coveted the robes for the warmth provided, and African American soldiers were known for wearing the buffalo robes on the western frontier. Have you ever seen what is termed today a Native American in any photograph or anything with what they are calling a buffalo robe? For scholars who have curated exhibitions on the African American military experience, coats like this one bring to mind images of the 9th and 10th Cavalries and the 24th and 25th Infantries, known as Buffalo Soldiers. These all black regiments were led mainly by white U.S. Army officers. The three black officer exceptions were West Point graduates Henry O. Flipper, John Hanks Alexander, and Charles Young. These black soldiers helped protect the nation's westward expansion by building roads and participating in significant military actions. The brave men also served among the first National Park Rangers. Black soldiers used military service as a strategy to obtain equal rights as citizens. Paradoxically, they sought to achieve this by engaging in government-led wars meant to overtake the Southwest and Great Plains from other Americans. According to popular lore, Native Americans coined the term buffalo soldiers either because the soldiers' dark, curly hair resembled a buffalo mane or because the soldiers fought like the fierce Great Plains buffalo. African American soldiers embraced the moniker by World War I, when the 92nd Infantry Division adopted the buffalo as the symbol for its unit patch. The regiments have been immortalized in popular culture through songs like reggae giant Bob Marley's Buffalo Soldier, television productions like 1997's Buffalo Soldier starring Danny Glover, and in films like Spike Lee's Miracle at Santa Ana, which chronicles the Buffalo Soldiers who served in the invasion of Italy in World War II. 18 African American Buffalo Soldiers earned Medals of Honor while engaged against Indians combatants between 1870 and 1890. African American men have fought in every American war, yet the Buffalo Soldiers, 2 cavalry and 4 infantry regiments, have a unique place in history and memory. They helped the United States become a vast continental nation and ultimately a world power. African American men have fought in every American war. Now, if the people who we term African Americans or Black Americans, properly Americans, were not called African Americans during these times, the times from, in every American war. We're talking the earliest to the latest. If these people weren't called African Americans, who were they? That's a question. Who were the people who were termed African Americans? They fought in every American war. Born in the Indian Territory of Oklahoma in 1897, Benjamin B. Blayton and his twin brother joined the 92nd Division in 1918, having left their small town for Washington, D.C. Both men were eager to see the world. Born in the Indian Territory of Oklahoma in 1897, Benjamin B. Blayton and his twin brother. And why would he be born in the Indian Territory? Let's see. National Museum of American History. And what we just read was from the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Laced with confusion. National Museum of American History. Over There, A Buffalo Soldier in World War I by Christy Wallover and Patri Ogan, 2017. Remember, Benjamin B. Blayton and his twin brother, born in the Indian Territory of Oklahoma in 1897. In celebration of Black History Month and in recognition of the 100th anniversary of America's participation in World War I, the Buffalo Soldier objects in the Division of Armed Forces history serve as a fascinating intersection of African American and World War I history. The fall of 1918. Fought from September 26th to the armistice on November 11th. The Meuse Argonne. Offensive included the 365th Infantry Regiment, 92nd Division Buffalo Soldiers. Corporal Benjamin Blayton was one of those who served in this historic American regiment. Benjamin Blayton, born on Indian Territory in Oklahoma. This is a photograph of Corporal Benjamin Blayton around 1918. Benjamin Blayton was born on December 6, 1897, Oklahoma. He worked on his family's farm. Remember how some of the 5 civilized tribes they say were looked down upon because they had chosen the white man's ways of farming and such? Benjamin Blayton was born on December 6, 1897 in Oklahoma. He worked on his family's farm from a young age before eventually, he labored He slaved. He was an employee of his father. He worked for his family. He lived life, self-sufficiency. He worked on his family's farm from a young age before eventually, we have to peel back some of the deception with the way things are worded. He worked on his family's farm from a young age. In other words, he did chores. Eventually moving to Washington, D.C. and becoming an electrician. At the age of 20, he enlisted in the United States Army on January 5th, 1918, and became a member of the Buffalo Soldiers. The Buffalo Soldiers were primarily responsible for supporting westward expansion by helping to build new settlements and to protect settlers. Here we have it. Here we have it. Case closed. Case closed. I can close out. I can X out now. Here we have it. The truth shines through. The Buffalo Soldiers got their name because their hair was curly and it resembled the buffalo. The so-called Plains Indians gave them their names because of that. The Plains Indians called them Buffalo Soldiers because their hair was curly when, in fact, I'm pretty sure a lot of the Plains Indians' hair was curly. But they didn't call themselves Buffalo Soldiers. Why did they call them the Buffalo Soldiers, or did they call them the Buffalo Soldiers? Maybe they were just associated with the buffalo because they were primarily responsible for supporting westward expansion by helping to build new settlements and protect settlers. Benjamin Blayton, who you just saw, was a part of supporting westward expansion. And what did westward expansion mean? Every buffalo that's killed is an Indian that's killed. Oh, you think people who look like you wouldn't to you? It was their role in campaigns against American Indians, against other American Indians in the West that led to their regimental nickname. The Buffalo Soldiers National Museum explained the combat prowess, bravery, tenaciousness, and looks on the battlefield inspired the Indians to call them Buffalo Soldiers. Sounds very romantic. Benjamin Blayton's World War I uniform jacket. Although they were part of the United States Army, prejudices of the era prevented most African Americans who weren't called African Americans during the era units from participating in combat with the American or British forces. Because as we saw in the 1828 Webster's American Dictionary of the English Language, we saw that American was originally applied to the original people of this soil that we call America, but now applied to the descendants of Europeans. Although they were part of the United States Army, prejudices of the era prevented most African Americans, properly American units, from participating in combat with the American or slash European or British forces. As a result, most African Americans, properly American soldiers, served as laborers, workers, employees, slaves. A few units, including the 92nd, served in combat with the French army, whose soldiers did not object to fighting alongside Americans. Benjamin Blayton's World War I Victory Medal with Meuse Argonne and Defensive Sector Battle Clasp, and his District of Columbia World War Service Medal to the right. I hope his family has these medals. Benjamin Blayton. Benjamin Blayton, Buffalo Soldier. He don't look like a dreadlock roster though. Let's shake it. This is from Ancestry.com. Talking about Buffalo Soldier Benjamin Blayton. Talking about somebody who was termed African American. Try to throw you off. Only person that's throwing you off is you. Benjamin Blayton, 1900s U.S. federal census. Benjamin Blayton is 2 years old. Birthday 1897. Birthplace Oklahoma. Home in the 1900s at 2 years old. Oklahoma. Race, he's put as black. He's 2 years old. He's put as black. You saw his picture. Let's look at him. We know that his eyebrows are black, but this is Benjamin Blayton. Male. He's the son of the head of the household. Father's name is Lustus Blayton. Birthplace Arkansas. Mother is Maddie Blayton. Birthplace Mississippi. Benjamin Blayton. This is Ancestry.com. This is the 1910. So we go 10 years. This is the 1910 United States Census. This is Benjamin Blayton, who is a 2-year-old black boy in 1900, born in Indian Territory in Oklahoma. This is Benjamin Blayton, 1910 U.S. Census. Benjamin Blayton, he's 12 years old. Birth date, roughly 1898, 1897. Birthplace, Oklahoma. Home in 1910 at 12 years old, Oklahoma. Race, he was a little black boy. This time he's a mulatto. Father's name, L.B. Blayton, Lustus Blayton. Arkansas. Mother, Maddie Blayton, Mississippi. Benjamin's occupation, Benjamin's occupation is farm laborer, farm worker, farm employee, farm slave. Who's the slave master in this case? That would be L.B. Blayton, his father, because he's the head of the household. So he would be considered the slave master. So everyone else would be considered slave. Do you see how this works? Industry, home, farm, soil, portion, living, life, self-sufficiency. Attended school, yes. Read, yes. Write, yes. Okay, This is Ancestry.com. Benjamin Bolden Blayton. World War II draft card. World War II draft card. Benjamin Blayton. This time he's black again. At 2, he was black. 12, he was mulatto. Now at age 44, he is black again, most definitely. Negro. Birth date, 1897. Birthplace, Oklahoma. Residence at this time, Washington, D.C. Registration date, 1942. Registration place, Washington, D.C. Employer, United States Post Office. 5'9", 147 pounds. Complexion, light brown. But race is black. Benjamin Blayton was from Blackland. That's the place on the other side of the ice wall. Complexion, light brown. Hair, black. Hair color, black. Race, black, and hair color, black. But his complexion is light brown. Eye color, brown. Next of kin, that would be his wife, Olitha Blayton. Registration card, World War II, Benjamin Blayton, Washington, D.C. Name and address of a person who will always know your address, Miss Olitha Blayton. It's his wife. Age and years, he's 44 years old. 1897 is when he was born. Birthplace, Oklahoma. Ancestry.com, Benjamin B. Blayton. This is a marriage index. Benjamin B. Blayton, male, single, black, age 22. Birth date 1898, 1897, roughly. Marriage date 1920. He got married in the District of Columbia, D.C. Spouse, Olitha B. Brown, who was later, of course, Olitha. There she is up there, Olitha Blayton. Her maiden name is Brown, Olitha Brown. Yep. Benjamin Blayton, Buffalo Soldier. Grew up on Indian Territory. 2 years old, he was black. 12 years old, he was a mulatto. 44 years old, he was black. He was black. This has been a presentation of part 1. Part 2 is forthcoming. Do the right thing.